Good evening, everyone, to today's Councillor Conduct Committee meeting being held on the 10th of July 2024, 6 o'clock at St. George's Centre in Chatham, Maritime. Thank you, members, for attending and all the officers as well. I have been informed that Councillor Prenter and Councillor Tijan are on their way. So shall we make a start? Welcome, all the members. So we will start with agenda item 1, which is apologies for absence. Have we got apologies for absence? Councillor Galpin.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Councillor Barry Kemp.
Thank you, noted. So agenda item 2 is the record of meeting. Is everyone in agreement that I approve the record of the meeting held on the 21st of February 2024? Agreed? No objections, so that is agreed. Moving on to agenda item 3, urgent matters by reason of any special circumstances. No one has raised anything, so can we move on? Thank you very much. No urgent matters. Number 4 is declaration of disclosable pecuniary interest and other significant interest. Thank you. Councillor Galvin, would you like to state what your...
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Unfortunately, I have an OSI in item 5, and I will leave the room whilst that item is being discussed.
Thank you for letting us know. And I would just like to let the members know that I've had a discussion with our Chief Legal Officer, and we are proposing that we turn it around, so we will be discussing item number 6 first and then item number 5, if that's okay with everybody. Yes? Excellent. Thank you very much. And you know exactly what to do when your agenda item has been discussed. Thank you very much for that. Anyone else? No. Right. So we will move on then to agenda item, what is actually on agenda item 6, which is appointment of independent person. And we have been provided a really good report by our Chief Legal Officer, and I will be inviting Babinda to now give that presentation to the committee, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. Members have before them the report in relation to appointment of independent persons for the Council, and they will be sitting on the Councillor Conduct Committee, but also in relation to another matter, which I'll go through in a minute, should that become necessary. The Council is required to appoint independent members as a result of the Localism Act 2011, and long-serving members will be familiar with that piece of legislation and the establishment of what's called in the legislation standards committees under those regimes, and it's a requirement that every standards committee have an independent person whose views are sought when considering any allegation that a member is in breach of the code of conduct, but also to provide support to any member who is the subject of any allegations, and that they can seek support from that independent person. The appointment process is one that requires approval by the majority of members sitting at full council. The secondary role of the independent person is that should the authority ever be in a position where it is considering disciplinary hearings against the 3 statutory governance officers, then 2 independent persons need to be sitting on that panel as well, and their views taken into account in terms of determining what action, if any, that they wish to take in relation to those allegations. In terms of the process for recruiting an independent person, again, this is stipulated within the legislation, and it requires that the local authority publicly advertise that role. In terms of seeking applicants for that role, there is a requirement in terms of what independence amounts to, and I've detailed that in the report itself, and it requires that in the very summary form that an independent person has not been a member or an officer within that authority for at least 5 years, and they're not related to anybody under those two categories as well. And it provides a very wide definition of what is a relative. Again, I've detailed that within the legislation. We currently have two independent persons. The first is Mr. Greensill, and I need to offer apologies to Mr. Greensill and members of this committee in that there's a typographical error repeated several times throughout the report and is referred to as Mr. Greenwood, and it is not. We only spotted that, unfortunately, after papers had been published, so many apologies to Mr. Greensill and this committee. Mr. Greensill has indicated that should the committee and the council be minded to do so, he would be willing and honoured to continue with the role that he has performed. And on a personal level, he's provided a great deal of support to me in reviewing complaints that we've received over the past few years, and I've consulted with him on a regular basis in relation to those matters. The second independent person, Mr. Tekandani, we've not been able to contact him either by email or letter, and therefore we are assuming that they no longer wish to continue in that role. So there is a minimum of at least one vacancy to fill. As I've said in the report, we're proposing that we do a public advertisement, and I will consult with the chairperson in terms of the wording of that process. Once the applications are received, I propose that I will do an initial sift of that to make sure that they can actually qualify under the Act to sit as an independent person, i.e. they are not a current member or officer, nor are they related to anyone, and not in the last 5 years either. Subject to that, then I would propose that all applications are shared with all group whips on the council, and subject to a unanimous agreement with all groups on the council. If there is more than one person still left as an applicant, we would then undertake an interview process. Again, details are covered within the report, with hopefully recommendations going to full council, hopefully for the October meeting of council. But again, it is subject to applications coming in and having suitable candidates that could undertake the role. I won't go into any more detail in there. As a chairperson has indicated, I think there's a fairly thorough report there. We've got the legislation included within that, and I'm happy to answer any questions that members of the committee may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gill. Any member? Councillor Howcroft-Scott? Before I move on to that, I'd just like to acknowledge that Councillor Tijan and Councillor Prenter are both now in the room. Welcome. Councillor Howcroft-Scott.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Could I please ask the legal officer whether there is funding put aside for this independent person, and what is this on like a consultancy basis, or how does that work, please?
Through you, Chair. In terms of the advert, I'm proposing that we will do that on the council's website, so there shouldn't be any costs associated in respect of that. This council does not pay any allowance to its independent members, although we do pay reasonable out-of-pocket expenses should they be required to attend committee meetings or undertake other events. For example, we had some training provided last year, which Mr. Greensill also attended, and we've covered those expenses. So it's actually a very modest amount of money that does go out, and that would be met within existing budgets.
Any other member?
Madam Chair, could I just come back on that point?
Yes, sure.
The reason why I was asking Perpinder is I'm just thinking maybe of single parents and childcare expenses, or, you know, I'm a foster carer, I have a complex needs child. It's very expensive and very difficult to get childcare for that person, and you know, it does indeed cost. So that was the reason for me asking that question, sir.
So through you, Chair, just in relation to that, I've covered the point in paragraph 4.5 of the report, in that whilst here at Medway we do not pay any allowance for that role, there are other councils that do pay allowances, but again, that would be subject to determination by full council through the scheme of members' allowances. The last report which the council had, and again I think that was last year from memory, there was no recommendation in relation to that and none was put forward. I know where, because of the shared service we operate with Gravesham Borough Council, and the monitoring officer there they do pay an allowance to their independent person. It's based on either a half-day charge or a full-day charge, dependent on the nature of work that is undertaken. But until we have a review of our members' allowances, I have no authority, should it be the desire of this committee at some stage that an allowance be paid, in order to effect that. And we'll need to wait until there is a review of allowances again and the matters before full council for determination.
Okay. Councillor Goldwyn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No questions on the report because, as you commented, it's very detailed, in depth. It was just from something that Bipinder's said about advertising via the council's website. I just wondered, the council's website, is that going to be readily read by a reasonable cross-section of our community or not? I just wondered, we regularly put, probably every week, in the local newspaper, statements about planning applications, road closures, and all those sorts of things. So we have virtually a page of council business. I just wondered if it would be quite economical to actually put that notice that we would like people to inquire, and then they could be directed to the website for further details. So just a suggestion, because I do seriously wonder. I know there are a few people that do look at the council website, but we want to make this as broad as possible, so we can attract suitable people. That's just a minor criticism, that's all.
Thank you. Noted. Anyone else? No? Right. On that basis, I move that the notes, the requirement for the appointment of independent person under the Localism Act 2011 agrees to recommend full council to appoint Mr. Greenhill for a further 4-year term, and approves the process set out in paragraph 4.2 for the advertisement, selection and recommendation to full council for the appointment of a second independent person, and also considers exploration of allowances for independent person when there is a review of allowances for members. Is that seconded?
Agreed.
Seconded by Councillor Howcroft-Scott. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. We will now move to the review of complaints 2023, and I would like to thank you. Thank you very much.
Right.
Yes. So I would like to invite Mr. Gill to provide us the report, please, about the review of complaints 2023.
Thank you, Chairperson. So I thought it would be appropriate with the committee meeting tonight in relation to the previous report we've just considered to provide a summary of complaints that the authority has received during the last calendar year. This is the calendar year 2023 that the report covers. Members will be aware, as set out in the report, that there is a mandatory obligation for each local authority to adopt a code of conduct that applies to all members and co-optees. and there is a duty on all members and corporatees to comply with that code when undertaking duties associated with that office. There's also a requirement that we need to have for determining and considering complaints submitted as part of that process. The report details that back in September 2021, the committee very generously granted delegations to me to consider complaints and to conduct an initial screening process of those complaints and to take no further action in 6 circumstances, and those are set out in paragraphs 3.2 to avoid unnecessary consideration of matters. For example, where a complaint is submitted but it doesn't identify a councillor, that would clearly not fall within the code of conduct. The other matters within there are obviously set out in paragraphs there, B to F, where there is no breach of the code identified, there is insufficient detail to make a determination, the complaint is more than 6 months old and there is no cogent explanation for why there is a delay in reporting the matter, where the complaint is outside the remit of this committee's terms of reference, or where the complaint is considered to be trivial, malicious, or vexatious. We'll go through the agenda, the appendix in a minute very briefly, but just to advise members that there are complaints that I've received that can fall into each of those categories. For example, where no member is identified or there's insufficient information, and some of those details are here. Those are probably less relevant for complaints that I've considered here at Medway, but I can say from experience of complaints that I've received and dealt with for Gratian, we do get complaints in that don't identify councillors, or in fact complaints that have got nothing to do with the conduct of a councillor in his relation to a service, but still submitted under this process. So the screening process does have its value to sift those out. As and when a complaint is received, I will review that complaint and look at the detail within it. I'll apply the code of conduct and I will produce a draft decision. That draft decision is then shared with the independent member to review, together with full details of the complaint that was submitted, and the independent person will come back to me with their view. To date, the views of the independent person have married my views, and we've not needed to have any detailed discussions in relation to those draft decisions. In the event that we have a divergence of views, then we would bring that complaint to members for members to have a view on it as to whether it needs investigating or not. In the appendix to the report, I have set out some very brief details of when a complaint was received, the summary of the nature of the complaint, a summary of the outcome that I have given, and the date of the decision. Both summaries, both of the complaint and the outcome, I have heavily edited. One, to remove any reference to whom the complaint is about. Secondly, who is making the complaint. And just as for information for members, I provide a fully reasoned decision that goes off to the complainant, and it is normally 4 or 5 pages long, and what I've just provided for today is a very short summary so you can understand that when the complaint was dismissed, the grounds on which I was dismissing it and why I was dismissing it. But I'm happy to expand on those to the best of my memory tonight. If there's anything further that I can assist with, more than happy to answer questions as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Gill. I did find that report quite helpful for me to understand, the complaints that have been made, as well as a review about how those complaints are being dealt with. So thank you for providing that helpful report. So I will now open it for discussion. Any member Oh, Councillor Brake.
Thank you. Thank you for the report, Mr. Gill. Most enlightening. I just have one question to ask, and that is that what is the normal timescale that a complainant would expect for something a complaint to be made, investigation to be undertaken, and a response given back? What sort of timescale are we looking at here, please?
So we'd normally acknowledge a receipt of a complaint within 5 working days, and we would hope to try and get a decision out within 4 weeks. This is at the initial screening process, so there is no investigation at this stage. The complaint form is sent in, we review all of the matters on the complaint form. I may write back to the complainant and say, you've said X, Y, and Z, but there is no evidence. Do you have any further information to support that? And therefore it may take longer. But generally, and it is dependent on workloads and other matters, but generally I would hope to get a decision out generally within 4 weeks. And just to expand on that, Councillor Brake, I know, for example, towards the end of last year, a number of matters took slightly longer than that, and that was down to me being absent from the office on compassionate leave.
Happy with that? Thank you very much. Anyone else? No? Right. On that note, I will move that the committee notes that the complaints that were received during 2023 and the outcome that have been submitted have been acknowledged by this committee. Is that seconded? Is that agreed? Thank you very much. That, in fact, brings us to the conclusion of today's meeting. But before we conclude, I'm sure all of us here in Medway will be wishing our very best to the England football team today ahead of tonight's game. So good luck, England. Thank you.